To the stage, Chip Giller.
Yay. Thanks so much for being here. Yay. Welcome to Agog House and welcome to Agog. This is our first regularly scheduled. We're going to have monthly meetups. I see Liz here. We did a sort of a prototype of this last fall, but now we're really ready to kick off some standard scheduling, some regular stuff. So we're psyched about that. Let me just explain to those of you for whom Agog is new. Let me just give some context. We are Agog as a philanthropic initiative, and our purpose, our focus is to help people use XR, help people use immersive media to imagine and to build a better world. We have a couple of programs. One is around connecting and convening creators and social change leaders. And this gathering here is an example of that. We do in-person stuff, we do in real life IRL stuff, and we do stuff in VRChat to connect creators with mission-based folks and mission-based folks with creators. So thank you all for giving us a bit of your time. Then we also provide grants. We have a support program where we're providing grants, philanthropic support to really imaginative projects that are trying to make the world a better place. So if you're curious about that, you can always reach us at our email address, which is weare@agog.org. weare@agog.org. And then even as we're learning a ton, we want to open source what we're learning. So that's our third endeavor, to share what we're learning. So it's connect and convene, support, and share. And so we're just super excited to have you all here. This house, just a word about Agog House. I saw Shushu, there Shushu is. Shushu helped to build this. He and Nico and Mangelberg, Mike, put this all together. So thank you guys so much. We couldn't be happier with what you guys partnered with us to build. It's beautiful. And if you want to talk to Shushu afterward, please do. So the program here, I'll introduce my colleague Amy in a moment. But the program here is, we're so fortunate to have May join us. So Amy will introduce May, then May will give talk for a bit, and then we really want to open it up to some Q&A with you all to hear from you all. The last thing I wanted to share is this Agog House space. We want to make it available to the community, so we're going to have regular monthly meetups in here like today, where we'll feature interesting folks and bring them into discussion with you all. But if any of you would love to use this space for your own purposes, please reach out. We want to share the space. And again, the best way to reach us is at our email address, weare@agog.org. We are Agog. So with that, let me welcome to the stage my colleague, Amy Sidenworm, who will kick off today's event. So thanks again, you all.
Thanks, Chip.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. God, so excited to see you all here. Thanks for coming. Couple of pieces of housekeeping before we get started. I think Mackenzie up front probably asked you all, but if you could please mute your mic once this gets started. Sometimes your dog wants to bark, sometimes FedEx guy shows up and it disrupts people hearing stuff around you. If you're on Quest and your left hand, that's the X button to mute your mic. If you're on a PC, you know what you're doing and you don't need me. The other thing is that we are going to do a Q&A with May afterward. If you're in this instance, you can just ask the question. If you happen to be following on YouTube, or if you're in another instance, there is a YouTube chat set up around the broadcast, and you can just type your question there. I'll get them relayed to me, and I'll ask them live so that everybody can participate. And other than that, yeah, please hang out afterward and use the space. I'd love to bring on stage May Abdalla, who, as you all know, is a director and creator and founder of Anagram. and a generally lovely human. All the way from Barcelona, here's May.
Woo! Hi,
Woo!
everybody.
Woo!
Bye, Amy. That was quick.
Bye.
Hey, gang. Lovely to see you all and be here as my new BitBatBot identity. Don't tell anyone who I am, so I can stay incognito. So I'm going to chat for, say, 15, 20 minutes. I know a few of you know stuff around me and Anagram, but I will give a little bit of a potted history. And what Amy really wanted me to focus on, and what is, amazing that Agog are doing in this space, is to really key in on why and how you can focus making work to making a difference. And yeah, so potted history, the proof is in the pudding. One of my favorite phrases. This is actually originally the proof of the pudding is in the eating, but generally, you can only tell that something's going to work by doing it. And I feel that that is so much about like the process we have to go through as makers, but also in terms of working out how to like create impact and measure it. So there's a lot of things to learn and experiment in this space. So good to share what I've been figuring out for the past decade. So I started Anagram 10 years ago, and before that I was a documentary filmmaker, still with this kind of, naive ambition to try and kind of change how we understand each other and ourselves and challenge some of our preconceptions. And in a way, for me, documentary filmmaking kind of died a horrible death because there was something that really frustrated me about the screen, people like looking at each other through a screen. And I just thought I had to mention that because there's just something so palpably awkward and real about VRChat, and my hands are wet with nervousness on my controllers right now. So I will. Oh yes, let's. Next is what I'm supposed to say. Do, 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 do. So okay, a little bit about Anagram. So really started off much more in like the physical experience space, very interested in interactivity. I've obviously been working with VR, but also physical experiences out there. This is a piece around, how we understand the intelligence in nature, as well as challenging kind of ideas about, how we consider and treat people who are refugees. Next, sorry. Mike, I think we'll get into a rhythm with the next. Gonna keep it rolling. And over the past 10 years, we've had a lot of success. And in a way, what I think is interesting to talk about, particularly with this community, I guess, is less so much about technology and how much that's kind of had an influence, but I guess reflecting on the approach of like throwing yourself into something. I am presently in Barcelona, but I kind of Anagram started in London, and that's where I'd been for the past 25 years or so. And I see Deirdre, people will know about like the immersive theatre scene, and that really did inspire a lot of the thinking around, the potential of creating kind of a playful space, and actually how meaningful that could be in a kind of political change or social change. So next slide. And there's this quote that I just wanted to put up here for a moment, just to consider some of the other subjects that I'm going to go through. It's from Rilke, the poet, and the point is to live everything, live the questions now, perhaps then someday far in the future, you'll gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into the answer. In some ways it's quite an abstract thought, but there's something really resonant in that for me, but just in terms of understanding that some of the greater social and political change that we are thinking about, and I'm really connected to a wide activist community, also starts in a very kind of internal, slow drip effect of people beginning to imagine something different. Next slide. 5 seconds ago. So, okay, so really quickly, what I'm going to do is take you through the first project that we ever did, really briefly, for the people who probably know only about stuff that we've done in like the VR or XR space, and then explain the Playing with Reality collection, which I'll explain. So actually, this is a user journey map for a piece called Door into the Dark, which was made 12 years ago. And it's an immersive experience that is set completely in the dark, about being lost. And I think that part of the reason, just, reflecting on this stuff around screens, is that, because news and documentary and constantly presenting through images and through things that people could see other people, I was really kind of desperate to try and find an interiority that we could use to kind of open up that imagination, like maybe even in a kind of dumb way, like protect ourselves from the kind of judgment that we can have when we look at things. So the piece is called Door into the Dark. This probably is a bit of an abstract map at the moment, but ultimately people entered the experience blindfolded. They were met by the last person who'd gone into the experience, who put the blindfold on them and put their hands on a rope. Inside the blindfold was a location sensor and a Bluetooth sensor and headphones that meant that where and how they moved around the space would affect the narrative journey. That journey, they would hear a number of stories of people talking about what it feels like to be lost in particularly profound ways, including a man who just lost his sight, and in a kind of naive, an extension of perhaps like what the film edit was. This kind of diagram showed the idea of creating a user journey where really the main character was the person, that although that they were ultimately listening to other people's stories, we wanted to kind of design something that was happening to them in the same way that it's almost like the classic hero's journey, the Hollywood thing of transformation, fear, anxiety. So how did we do that physically? Next slide, 5 seconds ago. So, for example, this moment of, I think there was a moment that was described there as euphoria. So we spent a lot of time in kind of weird bargain basements thinking like, how could you build something that would feel like euphoria? So this is actually, nobody ever saw anything backstage, but this is the bed, right? So at some point, a person would kind of find a wall, they would lean into the wall, and very slowly it would begin to sink, and they wouldn't really know what was happening. It was like the softest foam you could find, and the way people talked about this experience kind of very profoundly. Next slide. For example, the experience was transformative, felt so zen, like I've been on ecstasy or just finished 3 hours of yoga. Next slide. So that was just kind of like a bit of an insight into this journey of trying to design this interior space. So move that aside. The kind of Playing with Reality collection, which some of you might be familiar with, is a collection of 4 XR experiences, each dealing with a different mental health condition that is stigmatized or poorly understood, and I guess the challenge was that, given the limited reach of some of these technologies, is to think not only how that accesses the wider audiences, but also where is it important to focus on. So the first experience in this collection is called Goliath. It's a VR experience about a man who has schizophrenia. And in a way, when we started, we weren't planning on doing a collection, and it just felt that schizophrenia and virtual reality had like a tangible physical connection, the interactivity within VR, that kind of momentary deception that, all of the tricks really that VR has to kind of, from haptics to whatever, to just help you feel that actually, to help you feel, basically, to help you feel anxious or to feel exposed. All of those things are possible, and to really play with that design to kind of create a resonance with something which is a highly stigmatized condition, 20 years shorter life expectancy, extreme isolation. And when we were initially doing the research and asking people if you could design an experience that shows what it feels like for you to have a psychotic episode, who would you show it to? I think initially I was pretty shocked when everybody said they'd want to show it to their doctor, because you think doctors, those are the guys that know. But anyway, we've learned a lot of that since then. So then just next slide. Gotta get my anti-lag. So Goliath launched in 2021 at Venice, and had an incredible just had incredible responses from the online gaming community, who had a lot to say about mental health, including this person who says, "I'm schizoaffective bipolar. My sister found this. Let my parents play, who never could understand what was happening with me. Now they understand, if just a window into it all. I have tried taking my life multiple times, not being able to explain why, and this helps, if not fully, but enough for other people to understand mental illness." And I mean, what else? I'm just gonna get back on the stage. Okay, first time I was ahead of the slide too. I shall continue. So, off the back of interest from people in the medical field around the world, we developed a spin-off on Goliath called Inside Mental Health, which uses that experience plus reflective session and personalized data to deal with what is called within healthcare compassion fatigue, for people who after a while find it very challenging to work with people with mental illness because of the challenges that they're facing themselves. Next slide. And that has, that's being used in the NHS in the UK and Dubai, and in Bristol, 1,000 nurses have used it, as well as members of the emergency services. Next slide. Hi there. And there's a 92% success rate in terms of behavior change. And we're going through other impact studies at the moment, which is something which is, a much longer lecture that is easier to do with one's own body. Next slide. Okay, so then I wanted to talk a little bit about the second part of the Playing with Reality series, which is Impulse. Next slide, which is in a way kind of, for a number of different reasons, focuses on ADHD, and really thinks about what could you use reality affordances of the new headsets to emphasize, in terms of the fact that people with ADHD might experience things differently to you. So why I think ADHD is just one of those things that have become is considered to be something that is kind of a casual mental health issue. 22% of children diagnosed with ADHD have been told by a doctor that it might not be real, at the same time as the fact that it has huge implications on somebody's life choices. In many ways, it's a little bit more of a sticky subject to psychosis. Even people with ADHD sometimes are unable to see how ADHD affects them, which obviously makes it difficult to explain what it is. So next slide. This is a little trailer.
The more you look, the more you see. You're bombarded. It's down to you to sort this mayhem.
Oh, that's fine.
Suck it up. Circular thinking will get you nowhere. How much control do you think you really have?
Next slide. So just a little bit around, because I think with Goliath, I just focused on perhaps, some of the stuff in terms of what happened after the project. What I want to talk about a little bit with Impulse is just maybe some of that kind of proof is in the pudding process. So then there are 4 different characters in Impulse. ADHD takes many forms with varied impacts. Here are little mood boards for each of them: Tara, Leanne, Omar, and Errol. Next slide. Got to get faster. Pause. So then the question is, how could we represent, next slide, mixed reality in a way to really help people understand how their own environment, their bedroom, or where you are likely or might be using this experience could be completely transformed depending on your mental state, on the kind of the huge chasm that could form between like boredom and energy and excitement. Next slide. And how that could lead to people's life choices being so different. And obviously there was a lot of stuff to play with, so kind of what kind of thoughts could appear. Next slide. Mike, just kind of rattle through these, and giving a sense of like shadows, other people, memories, and in that kind of space also being able to show this kind of tapestry of these other 4 concurrent lives, ranging between like boredom and overwhelm. Pause for a moment. So I mean, I guess what always surprises me is the fact that it does hit home, but then also, it took 2.5 years to develop. We interviewed over 100 people with ADHD, each person for up to 2.5 hours. There's something, I guess, around having the, just, I don't know, the dedication to kind of knowing that what you're trying to achieve. But it's just I don't know. It's always fantastic to kind of feel like there's a resonance and there's a reach. Next slide, and I can't remember what's next, but I think we can speed up. And also that's being developed into teacher training kits with Game for Change and Agog, and workplace training tools presently in development with Foster and partners around DNI, because DNI still exists in the rest of the world. Okay, next. Okay, so briefly now, so the third part of the collection is Amorphous. Now, Amorphous wins super early R&D, and I guess in a weird way, I think it's where some of the stuff I was saying at the beginning, which is like maybe my personal reasons for entering this space, this kind of desire to, get into the physicality of stuff, think using my body instead of, thoughts that are complicated and contradict each other. Anyway, so Amorphous is about our relationship with our bodies. Next slide. And, in a similar way, I think it uses some of the best affordances of XR. This in particular is mixed reality. Why? I mean, I don't think we even really need to go into the why. Obviously we've got a crisis of people's. I mean, it used to be a conversation around girls, but obviously it's so huge, and there's so much that's kind of laid at the feet of technology and face apps, etc. A strong correlation between using face apps, loss of confidence, a rise in plastic surgery procedures, and body dysmorphic disorder. I think there's a report that says that 60% of the people who have plastic surgery actually have body dysmorphia, which I think is incredibly shocking. Anyway, body dysmorphia is, an extreme condition related to one's perception of one's own body and the distortion and dissatisfaction of that, which leads to suicidal attempts often. So then, next slide. So what I wanted to just show you here is some early research that we did, some kind of physical play, which kind of helped answer this question. Well, the goal of this experience, which is, I don't know how long it's going to take to make, is to try and transform how you feel about your body completely. And some people, I can see one person actually was there at IDFA in Amsterdam, where we did a day of workshopping. Next slide. So in together with Kat, who is a dancer and is a double amputee, we were exploring the dissonance between how you feel your body is and what it is. So very early on, with some research with body image experts, we were really advised not to talk about body image to people with body image, because it can really trigger the exact same feelings which people are trying to avoid. So trying to come at it from a bit of a different angle, we were looking at the experience of phantom limb syndrome. Here I am again, not on the stage. Phantom limb syndrome is the experience of people who have missing limbs or amputations, that they still have those limbs. Okay, and Kat feels like she still has legs, and we had done some initial kind of messing around with her in terms of what kind of avatars she liked to play with, but we're not going to go into that too much. But she often referred to the power of feeling amorphous. Next slide. I've just left my boundary, so I'm in the wall, but hi. Okay, so but could you create an experience of phantom limb syndrome? Could you show people how fragile perhaps the reality of our body is, and sense of it, or the kind of emotional emphasis of it? So yes, and so this is kind of a question. Here's some, this is an experiment where people were trained to have a third arm, and also how a boy with 6 fingers ties his shoelaces. But moving on, Mike, I think. Okay, so I think, Mike, we can go quite quickly. So this is some initial planning with Kat. I think it's great that she has everything you imagine is real. Okay, and then the user journey for the R&D session, ask people some questions, get them to do a body scan and draw what their perception of their body was, give them an experience that would try and respond to whatever their answers were, and can we give them a different focus in their body, a phantom limb, and then ask them to see how it's been transformed. Next slide. So, and what did we use? Well, we had a budget of £500, so we spent it on stuff at the £1 store. Next. Okay, so people would get a kind of they'd answer these questions, they'd draw their body. Next slide. And then they would get a kind of prognosis. Joke prognosis, but kind of, related. For example, they might be told that they are in a fragile state or have a startling strength. They would get this on a piece of paper, and they would then be, next slide, led to their costume. So this was actually a 2-person date. So in this one person was given a balloon costume and the other person was given a pinhead. And next slide. And we experimented with different kind of interaction prompts. So is it that the pinhead doesn't want to explode the balloons, or is it that they have to collaborate? Next slide. Here we were exploring kind of hands, and the jelly hand and the kind of the desire to hold hands. And this is all around kind of getting people to move in a different way. Next slide, Mike. But to move in a different way and to kind of focus on a kind of periphery. And in these, these were all around, exploring kind of things that had weight, had extension. How long do they need to do this until, in a way, they might go home and dream that they had 4 potatoes hanging from their head? Next slide. Almost as if there's a phantom limb. And then how far could these limbs kind of extend through other people? And what was interesting, I think, is that people did say that they felt like their bodies did extend through the bodies of others when they were asked to do these group experiences. And it's the key thing is obviously to have, this kind of time pressure and focus. Next slide. And some of those ideas were taken from like that earlier test, that early experiment of trying to get people to feel like they had a third hand that they can control. Next slide. This different kind of explorations in terms of focusing on things that are behind you, using a mirror, as well as trying to, so there's a bell inside that balloon and that gentleman is trying to catch the balloon in his back. Next slide. So in a way, I think there's one last thing. Sorry. In a way, I do appreciate that it's all quite silly and you're all muted, so I'm not sure what you're all thinking. But I thought I might end on this quote from Ursula Le Guin. Cannot ask reason to take us across the gulfs of the absurd. Only the imagination can get us out of the bind of the eternal present. And I think that if we think about how, some ways in which we can be very stuck about how we think about ourselves, or we think about, our nation or other people that we have, that, different ways of approaching things and how you can unstuck it. There is something about play and exploration and silliness, in the same way that Rilke says perhaps we could, if we ask the questions, I can't even remember the quote now, but whatever, we can rewind. Last slide, everybody. And yes. And this is why. Okay, and that's it. Next slide is just the thank you slide. Thanks, everybody. I hope that's enough food for thought for a good chat.
Hey, thank you, May. If everybody feel free to unmute your mic if you want to give May some love for putting up with our new technology and being a good sport and presenting her work.
Amazing.
Yay.
Great job.
And
It was awesome.
emojis.
That's amazing.
Amazing.
Lots of hard work.
Amazing. Yeah, exactly.
Agog.
Did somebody say that they're Agog? Thank you.
Yeah. Bring that word back into
You're a
common
god.
use, I say.
Exactly. So, May, I think you kind of touched on this right at the beginning of the presentation, but how do you feel like the work? When do you decide that the work is working? Like, what's that kind of in the process? But then also when you show it to people, what's the positive reinforcement you get? What does it look like, I guess?
Oh, that is such a good question. It's so subtle. I think the thing that you can actually tell really early on, and what you tend to find, I find, is that that usually as a maker, I feel like I have an instinct to make things way more complicated than is necessary. And it's through simplification that the process becomes more meaningful for an audience, or like the experience becomes more meaningful. So, so usually it's not working for a really long time. And the reason it won't be working and is going to be quite difficult, right, to tell, because people will tell you why it's not working, but they will perhaps overthink it for you, or you won't really know why it's not working. But there's just we've got quite a simple format of asking people to talk about their experience after they do a test. And when we've got kind of probably after a few years of getting it wrong, quite a good set of questions in terms of asking people to summarize or how they felt, and what they would want to do next, and just letting people kind of maybe just like write a paragraph on each of those things, and I think when it begins to align with what the goals of the project were at the beginning, then you know that you haven't gone awry playing with
Gotcha.
technology.
All right, I have one more question, and then I'm going to open it up to this audience. And also, if you have a question and you're out not in this space, feel free to put it in the YouTube chat. May, when you were starting to do this amorphous work at IDFA in Amsterdam, you presented some of this work, and you ended that talk by saying that that was going to be your last piece in XR. Discuss.
I think I said VR, by the way.
Okay. So that's
I think
that's it.
I think I got I think the reason I'm really excited about VR, and like I'm sure we all know that it's frustrating, it's expensive, it's if you put this much effort into anything, it would be so much more amazing. And I think that there's a challenge. You're so creatively blocked by the impediments of whatever, every single part of this, from explaining what it is, to nobody really being able to understand what your pitch means, to nobody really being able to never being able to draw a drawing that encaptures what it is, or the months and months you have to really try and explain to everybody internally and externally what you're doing. And there's something I think that I think I have just a bit of a desire for keeping it simple at the moment. And I don't know why I said that, to be honest, Amy. I feel different now. Do you know why I feel different now? I had 2 weeks off at Christmas. November is like do you know what I mean? Like, it was just at the wrong time of the year. Like,
Okay.
nobody wants to even like go. It's just one more thing before you can die. Really we should be hibernating by November. But I do think I did have a good holiday, and I feel less negative.
Relatable.
Are you all able to hear me? I can't move suddenly.
We still hear
Yes.
you.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay,
we can
good.
hear
Yes,
you.
yes.
Cool.
But
There
just
is
like,
a question.
how cute is this, guys? I mean, I just love how cute this is. This is great.
It's amazing.
I mean, I just don't feel like what I'm saying is going to be on YouTube forever. Just feel
It is,
free.
though.
I feel free with you
Um,
guys. I feel free.
We did have a question on YouTube from David asking who you think is the ideal viewer of Impulse. Who do you want to show it to?
That's a great question, David. There was a person who we showed it to, and then she she was a blogger, and then she took a headset and she showed it to her mom. And I think in terms of ADHD, I think there's a lot of frustration that people have in trying to explain what's going on for them, which is kind of indicated by what seems like unlimited content of people trying to explain in words about what's going on for them, and then people being misunderstood as like, so what, you're a bit ditzy and you don't know where your pencil case is. And so I think it's so much about in the way that people experiencing psychosis really wanted their doctors to understand what they were going through. I think for impulse, there's people with family members, because it's difficult to live with somebody who has ADHD. It's kind of, it seems like both illogical, you know, self-sabotaging. It's very frustrating. There's a person who I watched go through impulse and then cry. He cried at the end because he was thinking about how much he'd misunderstood his wife and just kind of instinctively finally understanding what he needed to do for her. And I think there's something about not telling somebody what they're supposed to do, but actually just giving them the embodied insight, which means that they can make more compassionate decisions instinctively because they have this embodied memory of what it's like to be there. So, we're going through this process of developing like a workplace tool, because obviously people with ADHD get fired a lot from work, and but often have really good and compelling qualities, but perhaps terribly impulsive behaviors. So there's something, yeah, sorry, David. I think it's really for people who but there's also the people who don't realize that they have ADHD, and just that light bulb moment. So I don't know. God, there's not one person. Maybe that's 4 people. The mother,
Fair.
the person. Yeah.
Teresa, do you have a question?
I do. Thanks. Hi, May. Thanks for the chat, and thanks for the question I have is, when do you know when to take the learnings from the absurdity and the playfulness and start reining it in to get more from the user to implement?
Yeah, good question. I think you always okay, so let me just see if I understood your question. When do you take the learnings from the playfulness? And well, I think as soon as you've done it. So like, even we did a day workshop. Obviously, it took more than a day to plan it and everything. But the thing about a public test is you just don't you have that pressure of a live event of needing to give people a good time. And you need, like, in a way, the invitation is the biggest step on the journey, right? Like, why would I walk through this threshold? And I think that, with Goliath, somehow it was okay to say it was about schizophrenia, but who wants to go on an experience to think about like how much they hate their, I don't know, their ears. So I think there's the key thing with the kind of play was, what bits were actually fun and related to the subject, and what bits were quite forced. And as soon as there's that kind of traction that makes sense, then you're like, okay, well, let's build on this, because that's a physical reality, fun and playfulness. I don't know, it's that thing, the proof is in the pudding. If it's not fun, it's not happening. If nothing is alive, it's like T.S. Eliot said, there are some words that are quick and some words that are dead. And that's just, and and I think if you read a poem, you can see those quick words, right? And there's some, almost you could think of some interactions as quick and some as dead. There's a dead interaction. It doesn't kind of move you. You don't go anywhere. And then there's something which is like, oh, okay, this could be so many other things. So I think as soon as you do a play test, and it was really great that Casper forced us to do that kind of public test. And, I definitely didn't want to do it when I said yes, I'd do it. But I know that kind of exposing yourself to real people stops you kind of being in that pitching world of saying people will feel this and they will want this, and that's always something that you're kind of forced to do. But as a maker, it's so useful as soon as you're given an opportunity to interrogate that and basically realize which bits are wrong. Like, there was a 7-year-old girl who came and did a bit of it, and it was interesting, like it was far too, I don't know, it was, in a way, you kind of see with children that they don't need so many rules to be able to play, because there was a lot of rules, which was like, okay, do this bit, do this bit, do this bit, and then this costume needs to be interacted with in this particular way. And you could definitely tell for the 7-year-old, she didn't really need to be told what to do with when she had the costume. She just wanted to kind of explore, and you kind of don't leave people to explore a bit because it seems like it might be too wishy-washy. And I don't know, I got something from that maybe some space exploration isn't a bad thing, even though I really like the ways in which you can control. The other thing that I think we learned, like, there and then, was just how important, because group dynamics are complicated, and this is a multiplayer experience in a headset. And the problem with group dynamics is, I do often feel that there's a choice between reflective and going deep and kind of being in the group dynamic. And so kind of, where can you use that group space to make something happen, and then how can you have a moment where seeing what has happened becomes interesting. So there's something, I don't know, like, there's all, like, I think you learn in the forge, in the that stressful kind of, it was a 7-hour, like, back to back. Public was just coming in. It's just, we have to improvise, we have to think about what's going to work there and then, and you start to kind of come up with the right kind of ideas, because you do somehow, because you think of the cheapest, most effective, simplest thing, as opposed to say, like, and then there will be these AI powered drones. And it will be amazing. You can add that later, but if you don't know what the basic thing is, then don't add the drones.
Thank you.
Do we have more questions? Thanks, May.
Yeah. Yes.
Somebody?
Yes.
I
Yes.
hear. Oh, Shushu.
Yes. Yeah. Hello. I'm not sure it's more of a question, or maybe rather my words would try to encourage you to stay with us in VR. As far as I know, if you look at the entire popularity of this of this planet, something like 0.6% of all the people on Earth are using VR. That makes us a little bit some kind of weirdos. But we in VR feel that we're doing something special, and what you're doing is very special, and we actually need people like you. And I heard about all the difficult technical issues that you had to deal with. I'm very familiar with it because I come from the theater. As a theater director, I come from the stage, and I had to learn all this programming and game engine and all that stuff that makes it very difficult. But there's some magic in all this technology, some other dimension that you cannot easily get in the physical world. And I think for what you're doing, there's a big potential. And I'd like to encourage you to explore VR more, join this community, and consider that VR is not only about making some experience or a world and then showing it. It's also about creating a community around you. Maybe you should consider also, creating some kind of a group, perhaps with ADHD people, because I participated in this in the past, and I had the chance to see how it unites people with the same issues, and they like to talk about it, and you become more close. When you create a whole community around you, you become some kind of a your activity is meaningful then. So well done
Yeah,
for what
that's
you're
really
doing,
nice.
and we need you. We love artists, and stay with us.
That's very beautiful. Thank you.
I know Chip mentioned this earlier, but Shushu built this world, just so everyone knows, for us.
Yes,
And
no,
yeah,
I'm
Thank you.
the god of the world has
yes,
spoken.
thank you, Shushu. Who else? We don't have a lot of time, but if we want to try and grab one or two more questions, let's do it. Braden, question mark.
Hello.
Hi.
So, as a creator of productions which are very focused on very sensitive issues like mental health, how do you sort of find the right balance in terms of making an impact, the intended impact on your audience between creator agency and user agency, which is to say, from creator agency, like making sure that the audience stays on the path that you want them to follow and the narrative you want them to follow to see the things that you need them to see versus the user agency where, you know, them being able to dip in and out of things, possibly miss some of the things that you want them to see, but ultimately have more control in the experience or the appearance of control. Where do you find the balance in terms of having the intended impact on the user when
Yeah.
trying to divide between those?
Yeah, I should mention that all of these projects were co-directed with Barry Barry Jean Murphy, who I would say has a very different approach to me, and we battle that one out. Because it's a subtle thing, isn't it? And what you really, sometimes you just find such a good way for people to feel like they're free. Sometimes you just find such a good playful space. Like in Goliath, there's this space called Synapse, which kind of, it's just, it doesn't tell you what to do, but you know, you kind of discover what to do. And like, you know, that's such a sweet spot. I also think that because my background is directing of films, I think, you know, it's something for us to be aware of, that I don't know how old the oldest person in this space is and how old the youngest person in this space is, but you know, I really feel like I am stuck in my old ways. It's particularly when it comes to this thing around control and like I'm interested how the next generation makes experiences and lives in those experiences, and that kind of like spatial possibility, because I think also my generation, okay, it's not necessarily a generation thing, I'm being ageist now, but first of all, there are different kinds of people, right? Like one, you know, this questionnaire that we have, like some of the things that are quite useful that we've been adding to this is even this thing of like, do you enjoy podcasts? Like there's people with a kind of desire to be guided in a particular way, and there's a people for whom distractibility is kind of part of that journey. And I think I'm learning more and more how to invite, you know, a range of, like, to leave a few kind of crumbs for different kinds of readers, let's say, people who, you know, like a thing that, you know, I would never like walk out of the room while a podcast is playing, because I kind of, I'm so obsessed with like linear narrative. But Barry would, because he's just like, well, just let the ideas kind of come in and out of my head and it mix up with the things I'm already thinking, or, you know, look at my phone. And so I don't know. So I think that, this is a really long answer, Brendan. I kind of saying that I think I'm very interested in creator control, but I don't think, and I think I want to be controlled by an experience, and I want I want to feel like a creator knows what they're doing with me, but I think that I'm just part of a spectrum of users, and I think I'm pretty far on one particular side.
That's a brilliant point you made there, with us being stuck in the old way of thinking, and that's what VR is actually. It's a big challenge, and we all have to go through it. Once you go through it,
Yeah.
you explore other areas in your mind that allows you to surprise yourself and others.
Yeah, but also I think it's okay if we acknowledge we can't transcend we can't transcend what makes us comfortable. You know, perhaps we need the ground and the sky, you know, but it's very possible that the next generation won't, you know, and that's okay. It's kind of we're introducing the tools for them to build this thing that we won't recognize.
Yes.
We have one more question from the chat that I'd love to get to if everybody has one more second. It's from someone named NN, who is a caregiver. So they appreciate your focus on compassion fatigue and the whole disability experience. They want to know if you've experimented with full body tracking.
Ah! Hey, NN. Literally, that's what we're doing next week. You know,
if you had a mic, you'd drop it.
Yeah, thanks. But I don't know what I'm going to think. I don't know how much, like, the question for me is always how little is enough. And let's see. I'd love to ask NN, why have you asked? NN, could you write, why are you asking that question?
Let me look. See if they're still in. Maybe we'll have to do that remotely.
I'll find out. Yeah.
So
question.
Oh, one more question. Sorry.
Way back, yeah.
Deacon, Tiny Deacon.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing. I'll keep it short. I was wondering if you've shown your work and experiments with new limbs and different different senses with Jaron Lanier, because I remember a while ago he talked about creating like one character controlled by multiple people. I'm sure he'd be very interested in what you guys have done with phantom limbs and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I was actually looking at I think that's his like first thing that he did was the third arm test. I will. That's great. I just assumed he'd never pick up his email, but actually I don't know why I assume that. Maybe it's worth having a chat.
I think the
When
power
I've
of
got
this room could get to
something-
Jaron.
Yeah, maybe when we've got something cool to trial, I'll drop him a line.
Cool.
Well, everybody,
Great suggestion.
thank you for coming. I think we want to respect everybody's time and wrap this up. Thank you, May, a million times for doing this. Everybody is welcome to hang out here as long as they want, and whenever they want. As Chip mentioned, if you want to use the space for an event, we would just, if you wanted to use the screen and some of the backstage stuff, we'd need to hook you up. So send an email to us at weare@agog.org and we can hook you up. Otherwise, welcome to come hang out here anytime. We will be doing different events every month. So stay tuned for what's going on for February. And May, many thanks. We really appreciate you.
Bye. Thanks, guys.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.